In the shadow of that old stone church, on what should have been a peaceful Sunday morning, 4 small children stood frozen in absolute terror as their father Harlan raised a loaded pistol, with pure hatred twisting his face into something demonic and unrecognizable. The air still carried the crisp scent of fresh-cut grass and distant church bells when the shots rang out without warning. Beatrice and Evelyn collapsed instantly on the cold stone steps right before the children's eyes. The screams of the little ones ripped through the morning air, carrying far across the valley, and in that single moment of unimaginable horror, a deep, burning fire of revenge was ignited that would smolder quietly for decades before finally exploding into a force that Harlan could never outrun, no matter how hard he tried. But to truly understand how a man who once promised forever could transform into a cold-blooded killer, we must travel all the way back to the very beginning, when the shadows were only faint whispers and the future still sparkled with hope and love that felt unbreakable. Evelyn was a vibrant 23-year-old woman with warm hazel eyes that sparkled when she laughed, and a gentle smile that could brighten even the darkest corners of their tight-knit valley town where everyone knew everyone's business and secrets had a way of surfacing when you least expected them. She first met Harlan at the bustling annual summer fair, where colorful lanterns swayed softly overhead, like thousands of fireflies dancing in the breeze, and the air was thick with the sweet smells of popcorn-roasted nuts and candied apples. He stood tall and strong, with broad shoulders from years of grueling work at the lumber mill, and his calloused hands promised safety and provision. "You're the woman I've been dreaming about my whole life, Evelyn," he whispered to her that magical night under the glowing strings of light while they shared sticky sweet cotton candy and their fingers brushed, accidentally sending sparks through her. "I'll build you a beautiful home with my own 2 hands. I'll give you a life filled with everything your heart has ever desired and more." Evelyn's heart raced wildly in her chest, and she fell completely and deeply in love, believing every word he spoke with the innocence of youth. Within just a few short months, they stood together at the altar in that very same stone church, surrounded by fragrant flowers and rows of smiling faces, as her devoted mother Beatrice wiped away joyful tears and whispered with immense pride in her voice, "He is a solid man, Evie. You two are going to create something truly beautiful and lasting that will stand the test of time." The early years of their marriage felt like a warm, unbreakable dream wrapped in golden sunlight. They welcomed 8 energetic children into the world, filling their modest but cozy farmhouse with constant laughter, endless chaos, and the pitter-patter of little feet running through every room from dawn until long after bedtime stories were read. Evelyn spent her days cooking massive Sunday roasts that brought the entire family together around the old wooden table, while Harlan came home every evening, covered head to toe in sawdust from the mill, kissing her forehead tenderly, and saying with genuine warmth in his eyes, "You're still the only woman in this world who makes this tired, hard-working man feel truly alive and loved." The children absolutely adored their papa, running excitedly to the front porch, with tiny hands reaching up the second his heavy boots hit the wooden steps. "Papa's home, Papa's home," they would cheer loudly as he scooped them into his strong arms, swinging them around until giggles filled the air. Life seemed perfect and invincible until the first tiny cracks began to appear like invisible fractures, slowly spreading beneath the surface of their seemingly solid foundation, threatening to bring everything crashing down one day. At first, the changes were subtle and easy to dismiss, as normal stresses of a large family. Harlan started staying later and later at the lumber mill, complaining about extra shifts and demanding projects. Then, entire nights began vanishing without any explanation or even a simple message left behind. Evelyn would sit alone by the front window for hours on end, gently rocking the youngest baby in her arms, with deepening lines of worry etching themselves permanently into her once youthful and carefree face. When he finally stumbled through the door at dawn, reeking of alcohol and cheap perfume, she would ask him, gently trying her best to hide the growing pain in her heart, "Where have you been, Harlan?" The children keep asking every single night when their papa is coming back home to them. He would snap back at her harshly with irritation flashing in his eyes. "I'm out there providing for this big family of yours, woman. Stop your endless nagging and be grateful for once." The rumors soon started swirling around town like dark storm clouds gathering on the horizon about a flashy, seductive woman named Loretta, who lived in the neighboring town. She was known for wearing tight, bright dresses that turned heads laughing too loudly in smoky taverns, and living a carefree life without the heavy responsibilities of children or a demanding household. People whispered in hushed tones that they had seen Harlan's familiar truck parked outside her small house until sunrise on multiple occasions. Evelyn discovered long strands of blonde hair on his shirt collars that were definitely not hers, and smelled unfamiliar perfume lingering on his clothes. One tense midnight, after all the children were finally asleep, she confronted him directly in the dim, flickering light of the kitchen, with her voice trembling, but filled with determination. "Tell me the truth, Harlan. Is there someone else? I deserve to know what is happening to our marriage." He laughed at her coldly and dismissively replying, "You're just being paranoid, Evelyn. Always seeing ghosts and problems where none actually exist." Yet his eyes darted away nervously, and she felt the first real icy chill of dread crawl slowly down her spine, knowing deep inside that something was terribly, terribly wrong, and their once happy life was beginning to unravel thread by thread. The final, devastating break came crashing down without any warning at all, like a violent storm that had been silently building for many months behind the scenes. Harlan walked through the front door one ordinary afternoon, carrying a fully packed suitcase, right in front of several of the older children who looked up at him with confusion and announced in a flat, emotionless voice, "I'm done with all of this. I'm moving in with Loretta today. She actually understands what a real man needs. You've become nothing but constant noise, endless demands, and too many screaming kids draining my energy." Evelyn stood completely frozen in the middle of the kitchen, still clutching the flour-covered rolling pin from baking fresh bread for the family, her mind struggling to process the words. "What about our sacred vows that we made before God in that church?" she asked as her voice cracked with raw emotion. "What about the 8 beautiful children who love you more than anything in this world?" Harlan simply shrugged his shoulders as if their entire shared life together meant absolutely nothing at all to him anymore. "File for divorce if it makes you feel better, Evelyn. I don't care one bit." The door slammed shut behind him with such violent force that the windows rattled loudly, and the children immediately burst into terrified sobs. Evelyn dropped to her knees, right there on the kitchen floor, clutching her youngest child tightly to her chest, while her entire world collapsed around her in shattered pieces, leaving her feeling lost and utterly broken. Her mother, Beatrice, arrived at the house within the hour after receiving the frantic call, pulling her devastated daughter into strong, loving arms and holding her as she sobbed uncontrollably. That selfish man will not destroy this family, Evie, Beatrice declared with unbreakable steel and fire burning in her voice. We are going to fight back hard. We will hire the best lawyer in the entire county and make sure he pays dearly for every ounce of this pain and betrayal he has caused. The town quickly divided itself into two opposing sides, with some people offering genuine pity and support, while others whispered cruel, vicious lies behind closed doors, claiming that Evelyn must have driven her husband away somehow with her behavior. But Evelyn's true loyal friends rallied around her, immediately bringing warm casseroles, watching the little ones for hours, and helping her gather every possible scrap of evidence and documentation needed for the long and painful divorce battle that lay ahead. Evelyn pushed herself to the limit, working 2 exhausting jobs day and night while single-handedly raising all 8 children, and still somehow managed to hold her head high with quiet dignity, even as physical exhaustion, emotional fear, and overwhelming grief threatened to crush her spirit completely into dust. Harlan despised her growing strength and independence. He began showing up unannounced and drunk at all hours of the night, pounding aggressively on the locked doors and shouting violent threats into the darkness that sent shivers through the entire household. You think you can humiliate me publicly in court and steal my house along with my hard-earned reputation? He would roar loudly enough for neighbors to hear. I'll make you regret ever crossing me for the rest of your short, miserable life, Evelyn. Her heart pounded wildly with raw terror as she shielded the frightened children behind her body. Leave us alone, Harlan, she called out through the door, trying desperately to sound brave and in control. The divorce papers are already filed. It is over between us. His menacing laughter echoed from the shadows, sending fresh chills racing through her veins. It is never truly over until I decide it is over, he warned before disappearing into the night, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with dread and uncertainty. As the divorce hearings dragged on for what felt like an eternity, Harlan's lies grew progressively darker and more vicious. He painted Evelyn in front of the judge as an unstable, neglectful mother who could barely care for the children, while the kids themselves sat in the courtroom with wide, frightened eyes, clutching each other's hands for comfort. But the tide began to turn when Loretta herself was forced to take the witness stand and casually admitted under oath to the long ongoing affair with a careless smirk on her face. The judge's expression hardened like stone, signaling that the case was shifting in Evelyn's favor. Evelyn felt a fragile spark of genuine hope ignite inside her heart for the first time in many long months. Yet late one stormy night, she discovered an anonymous threatening note that had been slipped under her front door, written in jagged, angry handwriting that read, "Keep pushing for this divorce, and you will never be safe again." She burned the note immediately in the fireplace, but the lingering dread and paranoia stayed with her like poison, slowly seeping into her bones, making every creak in the house feel like danger approaching. Beatrice urged her daughter repeatedly to stay strong no matter what. He is only trying to break you with fear, Evie. Do not let that monster win this battle. The Sunday of the special church family service finally arrived, and Evelyn convinced herself that attending would bring some much-needed normalcy, comfort, and spiritual healing to the 4 youngest children who had suffered the most. They dressed carefully in their best clothes and walked arm in arm with Beatrice up those familiar worn stone steps under warm, gentle sunlight, with the kids skipping ahead, full of innocent excitement and chatter about the hymns they loved. Then, without any warning, the heavy, menacing footsteps came rushing up from behind, faster and louder than expected. Evelyn turned around slowly, and there stood Harlan with wild, bloodshot eyes full of uncontrollable fury, and a pistol already raised and pointed directly at them. Time itself seemed to slow down dramatically as pure terror gripped her throat, making it hard to breathe. "You have ruined everything I ever had in this life," he snarled loudly enough for his voice to echo off the church walls. "You actually think you can just throw me away like worthless garbage after all these years?" Beatrice stepped forward immediately, shielding her daughter with her own body, acting on pure maternal instinct. "Harlan, think about your own flesh and blood, standing right here watching you right now," she pleaded, desperately trying to reach any remaining humanity left inside him. The littlest girl looked up at her father with wide, innocent eyes and whispered in complete confusion, "Papa, why do you have a gun? Are you going to hurt us?" The shots rang out, and both women collapsed instantly on the stone steps. The 4 young children stood completely paralyzed in shock and horror, watching the nightmare unfold before their eyes. "Mommy, Grandma, no." Their piercing, desperate screams shattered the peaceful morning air, carrying far across the valley. Harlan stared down coldly at what he had done, with no emotion showing on his face. "She brought this on herself," he muttered flatly, before turning around casually and disappearing quickly into the thick surrounding woods like a ghost vanishing from sight. The manhunt that followed was intense and frantic, with townspeople forming search parties and the sheriff's department dragging Harlan out of Loretta's hiding place later that same evening, where he had been cowering like the ultimate coward. The murder trial that gripped the entire county for weeks became a true nightmare, filled with graphic testimony and raw emotion. Those 4 small children had no choice but to take the witness stand one by one, describing every horrific detail of that morning, while Harlan sat across the room smirking arrogantly as if he still held all the power. "She humiliated a man's rightful pride," he told the jury repeatedly without showing even a flicker of remorse. "I only did what any real man would do in my situation." But one of the older sons, named Caleb, who had heard the distant shots from their home that fateful day, grew up carrying an icy, unbreakable resolve deep in his soul. He worked endless odd jobs throughout his teenage years, studied law books late into dangerous, lonely nights, and eventually became a relentless, sharp attorney famous across the state for fighting domestic violence cases with fierce, uncompromising determination. When word reached him many years later that Harlan was dying slowly of advanced cancer in prison, and Loretta was aggressively pushing for compassionate release so the monster could die with so-called dignity at home, Caleb felt the old suppressed fire of revenge roar back to life stronger than ever before. Anonymous threats began arriving again, warning him to back off or face consequences, but he pushed forward harder than ever, uncovering layers of bribes, tampered evidence, and secret backroom meetings between corrupt prison guards and lawyers. In the tense final courtroom, hearing Caleb stood tall and powerful, facing his dying father directly. "You took my mother and grandmother from me right in front of my eyes when I was only a helpless boy," he said with a voice like sharpened steel, cutting through the heavy silence of the packed room. "You stole our innocence, our childhood, and our entire future without mercy. You will not steal one single additional day of freedom on this earth." Harlan rasped back weakly from his wheelchair, barely able to speak anymore, but still managed one last venomous glare. "You were always weak and soft, just like her." The judge slammed the gavel down hard, denying the release immediately. Harlan died alone and completely abandoned in his cold prison cell only a few weeks later, with no visitors, no comfort, and no one to mourn him. Loretta had abandoned him the moment his money, influence, and health all ran completely dry. Caleb channeled every ounce of his pain into lasting purpose, using every hard-won penny from a difficult civil settlement to build a powerful statewide network of safe houses, legal clinics, and counseling centers, all named in loving honor of Evelyn and Beatrice. That foundation has saved hundreds upon hundreds of mothers and innocent children from experiencing the same nightmare, providing them shelter, protection, and new beginnings where hope once seemed impossible. The surviving siblings still gather quietly at that same church every single year on the anniversary, turning their deepest pain into an unbreakable force of purpose and light. Because true lasting revenge is not delivered through quick violent acts, but through a lifetime dedicated to protecting the innocent, raising strong, honorable humans, and ensuring that monsters like Harlan never get the chance to win again, no matter how long the battle takes, or how dark the road becomes. If this long story kept your heart racing with intense suspense, filled you with righteous anger at the betrayal, and ultimately gave you deep satisfaction at the justice that finally prevailed, then smash that like button as hard as you can right now and share this video with anyone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below and tell me honestly what you would have done if someone destroyed your own family in such a cruel and unforgivable way. I read every single comment because your voices matter here. If you crave more raw, emotional, true-life betrayal and revenge stories that feel like extended, thrilling Netflix series, then subscribe to the channel right now, turn on all notifications, and get ready, because powerful new episodes drop every single week without fail. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. Stay vigilant, protect your loved ones fiercely, and always remember that justice has a very, very long memory that never forgets. I will see you in the next gripping story where another monster meets his ultimate reckoning.